This is Morning Perfect Base, and I am Van Velding. I am going to work on my perfect base a little bit each week, and after a couple of months, we are going to see how much progress we have made. I am going... Oh, it's dark. Fuck. Alright. So, today I'm going to continue working on the walls a little bit, going to build them up somewhat so that I can have a good outline of the external walls of Perfect Base 4, so I can better understand everything that's happening. So I just want a good oh hey zombie, I just want a good vision of things so that I can do the aesthetic values of it afterwards. There's obviously not enough light up here. So I need to do a lot of finishing touches just around this place in terms of fine details. Regardless, I'm going to do that stuff. Last time I talked about a project I have called Enterprise 1, where all of the main characters from the Star Trek series, well, I say the Star Trek series, the original series, Star Trek The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager, the series that I am most familiar with, are all on Jim Kirk's Enterprise. And they're all alive, and they're all hanging out, and they're all just doing stuff, doing Enterprise things. I'll talk about the issues with stories later. So, what I did last time was I talked about each character and kind of where they were in terms of the new pecking order of things, the new divisions, blah, 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 blah. So anyway, Science Division. Picard runs it, Lieutenant Commander Picard. He's a little younger. He and Beverly Crusher are both a little bit younger. Let's just make Jack Crusher alive. You know, Beverly Crusher and her family history do not exist to give Picard an in to bone a lady with complications. Okay, Jack Crusher's alive. Bam, done. He's somewhere else, but he's done. Wesley's a young officer. He's an ensign or lieutenant junior grade who works under Captain Picard in the sciences department. He's assigned to the same ship as his mom, who gives a fuck. His mentor is obviously Picard. Spock is Picard's right-hand man. The enlisted guys, in order from highest to lowest rank, are Chief McCoy, Tech Senior Tech Chekhov, Senior Tech Chekhov, and Savick. And Savick is the one. Every division has someone with kind of a rough / criminal probationary record, and that's Savick, because for Savick, she was, I think, also supposed to be the character of Valeris from Star Trek VI, who participates in a plot. I mean, Savick is a character who is Spock's protege, and she is a Vulcan. She has a complicated background. Valeris is a female Vulcan who is Spock's protege, who has a complicated background, and eventually what does a crime in which the, spoilers, president of the Federation is targeted for an assassination. That's not great. I think redeemable, but not great. We roll both of those women into one character, not to be, you know, racist or sexist, or pretend that Spock can only have one female Vulcan mentee. Certainly, it's well within his idiom to adopt kids like goddamn Batman. So, regardless, we're going to make Savick and Valeris one person. Spock never mind raped her like what happened in Star Trek VI. Jesus Christ. And she is also in there. She's trying to make good. She has some slightly more hardcore ideals. Some of the more Section E31 type of edgy means justify the end outlook. Maybe there's some synergy with Ro in there. I don't want to get fully into that. We'll get to Ro. Next up, we got navigation engineering. Obviously, Lieutenant Commander Scott runs that. His number 2 is Dax, Lieutenant Commander Jadzia Dax, from the present day, as you may remember, in the Mission Specialization Division. Esri Dax is from the future, and she's here too, because why the fuck not? Who gives a shit? Next up is Geordi. Geordi's going to be the low man on the totem pole. One of the things that TNG absolutely abandoned was the notion that Geordi is this rising star officer. He's under Picard's wing, and he's going to learn how to command a starship. And I even feel that, though, that does happen in later episodes. I think Voyager does that. I really feel like that's just incidental, where people just make him a captain because that's the future and not because they recognize that initial plot for his character. Damn it. Okay. Regardless, okay, here he is. He's back at the bottom, going to work his way up. He is in the navigation section, which includes people that make the ship go and people who are good at navigating and controlling the helm. Impulse engines, warp engines, thrusters. That's their thing. Operations does everything else. Replicators, doors, turbolift, computer systems, scanners, all that kind of stuff. As necessary, there is overlap with departments. Obviously, weapons and operations overlap when it comes... security and operations overlap when it comes to weapons. Science and operations overlap when it comes to scanners, etc., so on and so forth. Our enlisted dudes are Chief Sulu, an older Sulu. The dude's just great at helm. Dude's just great at navigation. He is outstanding. Riker, Will Riker, that is Will Riker's wheelhouse. And I do want to talk about that. We get the impression that Will Riker came up through security. And security's full. You can, if your brain's working fast enough, and if you're actually not listening to me, you may have already worked out who's in security. So, here's the one shift I might make. That I'm open to making, is that we take Riker and we put him into, we put Dax into science, okay? She becomes the senior enlisted of science instead of McCoy. McCoy shifts over to medical, right? And he becomes our probationary criminal person in place of Paris. And then Paris shifts up to be a lieutenant commander of the navigation division, which has everybody in their wheelhouses that we know them as from the series. However, it puts everyone in a remarkably different position in terms of rank and experience, where McCoy apparently did some bad stuff. Dax is a senior enlisted, and Paris is a respected senior officer, which I have a very hard time imagining making that character from a cold start and still giving him anything that makes Tom Paris unique. You can do a story arc with Tom Paris where he progresses and he becomes more mature, and we find another thing for Tom Paris to have that isn't being the rogue pilot guy, or B'Elanna's husband. You know, I can see that. I just think the better option is the one I have, where Riker is a mid-level / junior enlisted. Paris is on probation. Dax is a senior officer. McCoy's a senior enlisted. I think all of those things dovetail well and let us play with those characters. Kind of not as we know them, but I think essentially as we know them, as the same characters. And still gives us some good story set-offs. I didn't mention it last time. McCoy is the senior enlisted under a junior officer, Spock, and I think that is fantastic. I think that is just a dynamite match for those two characters. This entire scenario separates capital T, the triumvirate of Spock, McCoy, and Kirk. And I think that's fine. The way this is set up, there aren't really a lot of people who are hanging out close to Kirk, except for the senior officers. I will get to that. So finally, we have security, headed up by Lieutenant Commander Kira. Kira just does not have a specialty as, given her background. She doesn't have an educational background in science. She doesn't have the pure flexibility required of a mission specialist. She can flexibly kill Cardassians, no doubt. She's a good leader. She's a smart person. She can think on her feet. She can get the job done. I would much rather have her as a chief of security who says, hey, let's think about some stuff. And her right-hand man is going to be Lieutenant or Lieutenant Commander Tuvok. And I couldn't think of a Magic Man and El Diablo combo more than Kira Nerys and frickin' Tuvok. I think those guys could fight well. I think those guys could cooperate well. I think you can definitely have a situation where there is some friction. And, she is a lateral transfer from the Bajoran militia. She has said, hey, as part of our want to show commitment to the Federation that we have newly joined, I am going to be the chief of security on this ship that is months away from my home world, to show that Bajor, cares about Starfleet. We want to contribute to Starfleet and the Federation. So I'm here. This isn't my bag. I've got equivalent credits that put me in this position. And Tuvok is like, I know the book backwards and forwards. I think there's great conflict there. And furthermore, when shit gets real between Lieutenant Commander Kira Nerys and Lieutenant Tuvok, those two people will lock it down, close ranks, and fuck you up. And I think that moment alone, if you don't foreshadow it, if you just let, shit, fuck, okay, the stairs are here. If you just let that happen, would be outstanding. I think that's just a great thing. Where they clash on the minutiae, they clash on the daily paperwork, they clash on all the boring shit. But when the action is happening, those two motherfuckers are just a single unit. And instead of compounding their weaknesses, they compound their strengths. I don't think I could write something good enough to be worthy of that setup, but I am happy to pitch it, Odo, junior officer of security. It is really weird to put Odo inside of any kind of structure, and yet his character exists solely within structure. They call him Constable because he doesn't even have a rank inside the Bajoran militia. He is a complete rogue. He's a complete wild card. Basically, Odo is a dude, and he has a permission slip from Bajor to do law. So trying to socket him into Starfleet is bizarre. But I think he ultimately likes structure. I think if you're ultimately like, no, it's this and this and way. Odo himself is a fascinating conflict because he likes getting the job done, but he also likes that structure and he likes that order. God damn it. And that can be like, oh, well, it's impossible to rein him in on being a member of Starfleet, but you can just as easily reverse that and say, look, he likes the structure and order of Starfleet. He tends to break that down by, stairs. He tends to buck against that sometimes because he still wants to just get the job done. Regulations be damned. And if you can't see a moment where him and Jim Kirk look into camera to see the solution to a problem, then look at each other, their eyes meet, and they both chuckle, I don't know what Star Trek you've been watching. Because I think these are both people who will say, yeah, sometimes you gotta bend the rules. Let's fuck this duck. It's a great amount of synergy. He's a young officer. It's hard to see the crusty old Odo as being a junior officer. But honestly, he has to start somewhere. You could definitely set up parallels with him and Data both getting used to this human thing. It would be criminal to take away Odo's past as the Constable of Deep Space Nine. So I would say, it's something he hates. He wrinkles against it. He doesn't like the rank structure. But he understands his way of being part of the structure. If Kira and Tuvok could have conflict, Tuvok and Odo would have to come to blows nearly, with a lot of grudging respect. I don't think either one of these characters is prideful as a primary quality, but I could definitely see how there could be some ego between these two guys because they're just both professionals. They're both pretty good at what they do. There's this untapped notion for Tuvok to be this amazing martial artist, which was never explored in the series. It's referenced several times, but he's like a Vulcan karate master. Spock is a Vulcan nerd. Tuvok knows, like all kinds of martial arts. Like I believe there's a scene where he's having a breakdown. I think it's that bad mind melt he had. What the fuck? You fucking shit. You didn't see that. I hit him. I hit him twice. There you go. 3 times. He was a tough one. So you have an issue where... Whoop, there we go. Haha. Where Tuvok could just be like this ninjutsu, Vulcan strength plus martial arts from around half the galaxy trained professional security guy. I love that both of them don't need weapons. I know Tuvok uses a phaser. I don't think it's... Come on, you can do this. Come on. If the realm does... Oh, god damn it. Why is there a torch there now? If the realm doesn't fuck up... I can do this. Come on, let's wall climb with some water. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. I'm wearing diamond fucking armor, and like the most... Come on. Come on. The most tragic thing is that half of its endurance loss has probably been to me jumping / falling off of things out of pure idiocy. Come on. I'm doing this. Fucking torches. Okay. We're gonna take a breather. What the fuck? Alright, let's get new water and let's try it again. So anyway, great potential. You should be able to determine by elimination who our security enlisted are. Chief Worf, Senior Technician Yar, and Crewman Ro. Ro's thing isn't security, but Ro doesn't have a thing. Ro's job is that she's the Bajoran. I want to see Kira Nerys bust Ro's balls so hard because Ro deserves it, and I think there are some legitimate differences between those characters that should be explored. I believe the same thing about Yar. Yar, Ro, and Kira all have things to work through in terms of the uniqueness of their characters, and I think that putting them all in security is great. I think that Yar and Worf work as... There we go, buddy. I think they work great as junior enlisted. They're the guys who are going to get down there. They're going to go sick house on some motherfuckers. You see a security party where Picard's like, where Kirk is like, all right, let's take this guy into custody. You're done, mister. And you beam down with Worf, Yar, and Ro. And I'm trying to imagine a motherfucker who would, because those are 3 motherfuckers that wish a motherfucker would. Those guys hanging out together, I can't... I honestly can't imagine 3 more dangerous people to put into a division together. Obviously conflict, some great conflict. But at the end of the day, I think they're all good folks who keep their eye on the prize. Maybe not Ro, but of all those characters, I think she has the most learning to do. Also in the DS9 books, they make her chief of security to replace Odo. I don't know how all that works out logistically. Oh, she was part of the Maquis, so they're like, oh, you can't just go back to Starfleet. Like, oh, but you can go back into the Bajoran militia, and then they're going to end up with Starfleet. So I don't know how it works. Regardless, Ro just can't stop doing crimes. So those are the divisions and the characters in each of them, kind of their new specs. So in addition to each person being within a division, that kind of sets them up for who they interact with. And everyone has kind of a more, an environment that's based more around their specialty. That is to say that characters exist within a unit of what they do, and they also exist within like a social and rank-based strata. TNG has 6 characters, 8 characters, something like that. They're all senior staff. They all go to the meetings. They're all in the study group. It's the same thing with DS9, basically. And in fact, one of Deep Space Nine's problems is that characters like Jake and Quark had a hard time fitting in with a lot of stories simply because they were part of a different strata. So instead of just having 6 central crew members, you now have 36, 37, maybe 44 main crew members. And so your stories then are not based on what is the big picture, what is the ship doing this week. Your stories, your big picture, your stories are based on what is the human story here, what is the sub story here. If you listen to the Beige and the Bold, you know that Derek and I talk about what happens behind the scenes. What about this little guy who sets up this thing? I think those are fun little stories, not necessarily dramatic stories or thought-provoking stories or deep stories, but fun stories that you can have between these characters, where it's like, hey, we're doing a big diplomatic thing. You know, what's Kess doing with those napkins or whatever. The entire point of making sure that everyone is alive and they're all friends and they all serve together is that we're having fun with the idea. So, in addition to the vertical stories of everyone being in a division, you have horizontal stories of rank and rank structure. Starting with our I don't say prison guys, but our probationary members of the crew. And those are Nog, Chakotay, Paris, Savick, Torres, and Ro. And for the enlisted guys, you're talking 6 people to a berthing. So these people literally live together. They share bunk. They share, lights out. They have common duty shifts. They work with similar superiors for certain situations. These... right, so they commiserate and they're miserable and they have common things. I'm sure there's even a pecking order amongst the crimes. Most of these crimes are Maquis crimes, notably. Chakotay, Paris, Torres, Ro, those are all Maquis-based crimes, unless you want to put Ro back on her original, the thing that got her in the stockade, which is fine, which is a good thing to do. And, Nog, he was a petty thief, then he became a member of Starfleet. I think that's a fine bit. Savick committed treason. Maybe she committed some slightly lighter treason in this go-around. Regardless, so there's a pecking order, there's a sort of inertia. Chakotay used to have a higher rank. He got busted down. Savick maybe had a higher rank. She got busted down. So these characters happen to room together. They have that in common. Again, like a Lower Decks. And that Lower Decks theme is reflected in our junior enlisted guys. Again, they all birth together. You're talking Esri Dax, Kess, Chekhov, Riker, Yar, and Data all share the same birthing room, and I think that's just fucking hilarious. I love it. I think it's fantastic. I'm going to wrap this up here in a bit. So, again, these guys share living space, and you have senior enlisted, maybe 2 to 3 men to a room. I said 3 to a room where the EMH, Sulu, and Worf all live together, which I think is great. O'Brien, Chapel, and McCoy work together, which I've already thought about, like a nascent storytelling where O'Brien and McCoy literally share booze from the same flask, and they share an infection because of it. And Crusher's like, what is that? It's fucking gross. Come on, it's 23rd century. Let's get over that shit. Same thing for the junior officers. We're talking Uhura, Rand, and Geordi sharing a room. We're not going to do any kind of juvenile Geordi sex shit. It's just hilarious. What other aspects of their characters, can we leverage some fun stories out of those 3 living together? The same thing for Bashir, Wesley, and Odo. I cannot even imagine what that looks like. I just can't. It's like a no fun nerd room. I'm trying to imagine, like, everybody thinks that these 3 junior officers, relatively young people, they're always up to something, and they think that Odo's the wet blanket, but no, they're all just serious nerds just studying shit, and just being totally nerds. Like, if I know I gotta wrap it up. If the Big Bang Theory, it was less offensive to nerds, it would be that would be the Wesley, Odo, Bashir room. Anyway, I gotta get a good sign off, so I'll see you guys later, alright?